Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Christian Gokel alongside Cam Ursery and PJ Zuko here, getting you ready for championship weekend coming up, and so much news to dive into. PJ, yesterday I didn't let Cam let me look ahead slash start talking about these new coaching hires because I wanted to give rivalry week its just dues for how awesome it was. And I wanted to kind of recap all of that. So before we dive into all of the news, because there's been a ton of it, what were some of your favorite moments from this past weekend? Because, I mean, we had Michigan just smacking Ohio State. I know it didn't go the way you wanted to, but just the perfect Big Ten weather game in East Lansing between Penn State and Michigan State, which it should be illegal for Penn State to wear their all whites when it's snowing like that.
But wait, it didn't make it any easier for the people watching at home.
Well, no, your offense is atrocious, and I would think you want to do anything possible to help Sean Clifford see his wide receivers, but
yeah,
that's just me.
Well,
but yeah, what were some of your favorite moments from this past weekend?
Oh man, there were a ton of them because there are so many times you look back at college football, and I had a discussion about this with someone over the weekend of great teams, great programs, historic programs. They are that way. They are so traditional, and they are loved or hated because of how good they are and because of how good they are consistently. You always want to see those upset wins because you're rooting for the underdog and whatnot. But there is something special and respectable about those teams that you're always looking to get upset, right? The Alabamas, even in the Ohio States, even Oklahoma in Bedlam, you know, they always win Bedlam, right? And even on those years that maybe they're expected to lose and Oklahoma State, quote unquote, has a better team, they somehow find a way to win. So it was so interesting to me and cool, and it's hard to just choose one. There are so many instances where you look at those rivalries and look at those big games, and it's like, well, I wish we could just have a weekend where this team won, this team won, this team won. Those teams won, man. Like Michigan went out. I thought there was no shot. And believe me,
Ohio State.
I want both teams to lose that rivalry every single year. I do. But to see them go out there and win, I was like, holy crap! I didn't think this was possible. Especially with the teams this year. But I mean, I didn't think it was possible. So they go out and win. And it's like, well, Oklahoma State might lose tonight. That just because that's how things work out. Oklahoma State wins. They make it to the Big 12.
Oklahoma State did their best. They did their best to not.
They did. But like the Big 12 championship game this year is Baylor and Oklahoma State. That's insane.
How happy do you think? How happy do you think Bob Bowlesby is about that? The fact that Oklahoma and Texas, neither one of them made it.
Yeah.
And so he can just kind of double middle fingers.
Right.
Both of those schools.
As he should, but I mean, right? But no, you're right about that. I mean, Wake Forest, they didn't find a way to let Clemson in, right?
Wake Forest and Pitt are the ACC championship.
I love like looking down and you see the SEC championship game, and it's like it's Georgia and Alabama, and believe me, that's a game I've wanted to see all year. So I'm looking forward to that for sure. But then you look at all the rest of them, and I'm like, this is going to be a wild ride, and I can't wait for it. So, but you had to have that weekend, that kind of weekend to have that. So it's hard to just choose one. I think even you look at one where that upset didn't happen, and that the Iron Bowl with Alabama and Auburn was insane and fun to watch as well. So it was a wild ride, and I enjoyed every second of it for sure.
And again, it kind of sets us up for an awesome championship weekend, but more so than that, it set us up for what we have seen over the past 48 hours, which is just the most prolific and significant coaching changes we've ever seen in this sport, period. End of story. I mean, Nick Saban coming back to Alabama from Miami doesn't hold a candle to what we're seeing right now in college football. You had USC go take Oklahoma's coach, and then the news breaking last night that Brian Kelly is leaving Notre Dame, which is one of those jobs that I've always thought is you don't leave that job.
Ever. Yeah.
It's one of those, I've always figured it was a pinnacle one, but now kind of looking reports coming out about what his salary was versus what it's going to be. Suffice to say, he's going to be making more than twice what he made every year at Notre Dame at LSU. Hard to say no to that. But Brian Kelly didn't just leave Notre Dame. He left Notre Dame when Notre Dame still has a chance to go to the college football playoff.
Mhm.
Now, I'd put it at 10%, maybe a 10% chance that Notre Dame goes. They need Georgia
Right.
to eliminate Alabama, and then they would need, I'd say, one other team to lose. Like they need Oklahoma State to lose or something like that. They need Michigan to lose to Iowa, something like that. But again, they're a 6.5-point favorite winning in Georgia and one upset away from going to the college football playoff. So they're one of like 7 teams that can still get in. And Brian Kelly is just banking on the fact, or maybe he's not, maybe he just didn't care either way, but Brian Kelly is leaving his team when they still have a chance to go to a college football playoff and still have a chance to win a national championship. He said, not a big enough chance. I'm taking my talents to Baton Rouge. And couple notes here that I wanted to put out there. Number one, this isn't the first time Brian Kelly has done this. If you go back and look at his tenure, not an overly great dude. He wins a lot of regular season games, but just not an overly great dude. 0-4 all time against Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. Nick Saban, he is 0-2 against him in the postseason, and Kirby Smart, he's 0-2 against him in the regular season. So kind of a good back and forth there. And then he's 0-5 in what I would call big postseason games. Yeah. New Year's Six, BCS, college football playoff. He's 0-5. Mm-hmm. And so when I look at this hire, yeah, it's a big hire, quote unquote, because it's Brian Kelly, because you went and stole Notre Dame's coach. But I don't think this is a great hire for LSU. I think this is probably the 3rd or 4th guy they wanted.
I can see that.
Yeah, I don't think he was number 1 when LSU went out there and started this coaching search.
Yeah,
I think the guy they really wanted is currently residing in California.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at this, I'm thinking you have a coach who was making $4 to $5 million a year. Now he's going to be making about 10 at LSU, and he's been doing this for a long, long time. Is he maybe just taking your money for the life of this contract? And is he as passionate as you need to be to compete with Nick Saban and with what Kirby Smart has built at Georgia? Is he passionate enough to bring in the top 3 recruiting classes, or I'd say top 2 recruiting classes now that it takes to compete with those 2 teams? Is he passionate enough to go head to head with those guys? Now it's going to go to a pod system where you're probably going to be in there with, I don't know what, they're going to be in there with Texas A&M and Oklahoma and Texas, maybe something like that, where they're going to be in with those guys, or you're going to be in there with Alabama and still have to play Alabama every year, right? Are you think he's that fired up, or what's more realistic? LSU will be a really good team, and they'll go 9-3 every year.
Right. I would say I give him mad respect though for going, and the reason why I'm saying that, I mean, we saw Lincoln Riley go out west to USC when he could have took an SEC job or stay with Oklahoma and go to the SEC.
He did have an SEC job,
yeah, he did. But I give Brian Kelly, I mean, I just give him mad respect because it's like, okay, Nick Saban, he's beat up on me in the national championship and postseason. Kirby Smart's got me in a couple of close games in the regular season. Let me go get guys that they got now. Let me see if I can match up. The only thing Brian Kelly is missing from his resume is what? A national championship. He's the all-time winning coach at Notre Dame.
Postseason win.
Yeah, postseason win, but he's the all-time winningest coach at Notre Dame. He has the most wins. Let's put it like that. I wouldn't say winningest because he doesn't have a championship. But that's what he's missing. I think he could capture that at LSU. Every coach in the past, decade or 2 decades, they've gotten a national championship at LSU. Orgeron, Les Miles, and then Nick Saban. He could be the 4th one. So I give him mad respect. It could go bad, but he's not scared. He's not running from what I call that SEC smoke. He's not scared. So I do respect that a lot.
Yeah, it's a respectable decision in that, right? I think how I come at it is this is when we really figure out how good of a coach he is. Like you said, he's won several regular season games. He's gone out and kind of built Cincinnati, right? He was Cincinnati there before Notre Dame, built them up into prominence in some ways. There was some good winning seasons there. And then, of course, now the winningest coach there in Notre Dame history. But again, I think the reason he takes this job is the potential to get over. I don't think he's seen what Notre Dame right now, and I'm sure I'll have every Notre Dame fan I know blowing up my phone if they hear this, but I think he's seen the potential that Notre Dame has right now, and they don't really have the size, and that comes down to recruiting. But like when you get in those big postseason games, they're outplayed and that they've been outmatched by Georgia, by Alabama and whatnot. I think you look and you see LSU and see them being able to compete in some ways when it comes to that size and recruiting and things like that. And like we talked about, LSU being the major school in that area, in that state, and you see the potential of that. But now it's like you have all those resources. Now you have to go out and get it done. Is Brian Kelly the person I think who's going to go out and get it done? Not necessarily.
I'm not trying to take shots at you guys here at all. And I understand what you're saying, where it's a new challenge and it's one where you can win at the highest level. Brian Kelly didn't leave Notre Dame for wins.
Oh, he won it for money.
Yeah, if you wanted if you wanted to go 11-1, 12-0 every year, you could stay at Notre Dame and he'll be in the college football playoff almost every year. And then all it takes is you get a good quarterback or somebody in there, you get a Joe Burrow, something like that, and you win 2 games and you win a national championship. Yeah, I think his most realistic spot to be in if you wanted to win a national championship is Notre Dame, because you're going to be right there every year. Think about what LSU has to battle through every single year just for a shot to go to the college football playoff. Brian Kelly was making, per USA Today, $2.7 million a year at Notre Dame.
Yeah, no,
with incentives and bonuses, he can make $15 million a year at LSU. Yeah. He did not leave because he's a competitor. He left because they dropped the Brinks truck on his head.
Yeah.
And like I said, Brian Kelly's not a great dude. Like go read about how he's treated some of his former assistants when he was the head coach at Central Michigan and some other spots. Like go read about how he's treated people in the past. And this is not the first time he's left a program like this in a lurch. Right? So Brian Kelly's not a great dude. He's not just some competitor that's going to take over LSU because he wants to fight Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. Dude can make $30 million in 2 years. He can literally make what he would make in a decade at Notre Dame. He can make that in 2 years. That's why he left Notre Dame. I don't think there's anything else to it. We got to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to catch up with McLean Baxley from the Athens Banner-Herald. He's covering Georgia up there, and talk about a heck of a first year for a guy covering a team. Georgia headed to the SEC Championship, undefeated, best team in the country, consensus #1. Also going to catch up with him. He covers the North Oconee Titans. They, of course, are coming down to take on Benedictine in the Class 4A GHSA semifinals in football. We'll dive into all that next right here on ESPN Radio. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. We will be live at Coach's Corner coming up this Thursday from 2 to 6 p.m. Second Down, followed by 3 and Out as we get you ready for championship weekend. Coach's Corner in Savannah. Come hang out, say hi. Be playing lots of fun games, giving away prizes. So come hang out with us at Coach's Corner. Joining us now on Second Down, though, we got a couple of big games we need to catch up with him about from the Athens Banner Herald, formerly of the Savannah Morning News. McLean Baxley joining us here. McLean, it's been a long time, man. Good to talk to you.
It's good to see you. Good to hear you. All right, talk with you. I'm not seeing you.
I was about to say, do you have a camera somewhere in the studio that we don't know about?
I'm always there. I'm always watching.
Well, we appreciate that, man. So let's start at the high school level, man. I know your first year up there at the Athens Banner Herald, and it's been a heck of a year for North Oconee. First question, do we get a McLean Baxley sighting down in Savannah this weekend?
Not looking like it. No, fortunately, we've got 2 teams in the semifinals this week, so I'll be up at Fellowship Christian where Prince Avenue is set to play. In the single A private. So I'll be up there, but I'll be there. I'll be in Savannah in spirit.
Of course. But again, North Oconee coming to town to take on Benedictine. And this is a couple teams that have already played this year, now meeting in the semifinals. But earlier in the year, it was 48-17 BC. But looking at it now, since that game, North Oconee's ripped off 9 wins in a row. Tell us a little bit about the Titans, man, because I know you've been following them closely.
I mean, since that game, they had a bye week after that game. They lost to Benedictine. They're 1-3 to start the year. Like you said, they won 9 straight, and pretty convincingly, and doing so in a variety of ways. They can run the ball really well. They've got several running backs, and quarterback Max Wilson also very good. They can throw it when needed. They've got Wilson and Khalil Barnes. He's another junior. Wrote a story about him the other day, but he's got speed and just can make something out of nothing, whether it's in the run game or in the passing game. And their defense is really what they hang their hats on. I mean, they held Jefferson, who at the time was number 1 team in 4A, have weapons all across the board, and held them to less than 10 points. So the fact that their defense has been able to do that week in and week out. They had a shutout in the second round of the playoffs against Spalding. Again, they won 37-0. So I mean, they're just consistent all across the board, and definitely a very different team than we saw back in September.
From the recruiting perspective, anybody Savannah fans should be keeping an eye on for North Oconee?
I mean, 2 of the guys that I've been looking at, Khalil Barnes and Dominic Elder. Dominic Elder, they're both juniors. Elder is more of a running back, and Barnes is more of an athlete, receiver, DB, running back some. They're both guys. No real offers yet, but 2 guys that have been on campuses several times this year, some G5s and even Georgia Tech, and some other schools. But they're guys that through this off season and next year in the senior season will definitely continue to take off recruiting wise. But just a lot of talent and a lot of skill that's really gone unnoticed. I think I was talking to the coach the other day, and there's 0 offers at North County. So, but they're still one of the top 4 teams in 4A. So. I expect a lot of offers to come this offseason, but just a lot of talent on the field.
Yeah, kind of in contrast to what we see from BC, of course, Holden Garner going to Auburn, the quarterback, Justin Thomas, who's really, I think, should be up there for player of the year in 4A. He's going to play baseball at Georgia, but I'm sure he would have plenty of football offers if that wasn't the case. And then Saquon Bryan, he's got an offer from Coastal Carolina. What's kind of the perspective from up in Athens about this Benedictine team?
I mean, obviously, we saw what happened. They won by 31 points, 2 or 3 months ago. Benedictine, they've won several state championships in the past couple of years. They're used to playing deep into November or deep into the season. Whereas North Carolina, this is their first time in the Final Four. Obviously, been playing only since 2004 when the school opened. But there's a history with Benedictine. There's it's an expectation for BC to be playing in the Final Four and in the state championships, and really North County, there was no expectation. This team is kind of setting that expectation. I wrote a few weeks ago how this team is kind of a 3 or 4 year process, and the culmination of that that's been building. So they're definitely aware that BC is definitely the favorite. It's going to be a tough environment down there in Savannah. But they've been there 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they were there. Or 3 or 4 months ago, and last week going down to Bainbridge, that 5-hour trip, they left on Thursday. Stayed in Albany Thursday night. So they have experience recently going into a hostile environment, very much away from home. Not going to be a ton of fans supporting them, I would assume. I mean, it's about 4 hours from here, so it's going to be a difficult environment. But I think they're ready and excited for the challenge.
Catching up with McLean Baxley from the Athens Banner Herald. McLean, correct me if I'm wrong, but David Pollock's on that staff, right? At least in a peripheral role.
He works more with the middle school. Obviously because of college game day and ESPN requirements, he can't be there on Fridays. They're usually traveling to wherever they mean. He might be. There's a good. I would assume that David Pollock will be in attendance in Savannah. With game day being in Atlanta on Saturday, but yeah, I mean, he's definitely involved in the middle school, so he knows all these guys. I talked a few weeks ago when last time game day was here. I think it was the Kentucky game. He was just talking about how he knows all these guys. He's coached them in middle school. He's seen them develop over the years, and he's definitely a strong supporter. Both times he's been to game day on Friday. We talked to the game day staff on Friday, and he is wearing either a hat or a shirt, North Carolina shirt, and sometimes both. So he's very high on his former Titans.
All right, so flipping over now to that game that you're mentioning in Atlanta, Alabama, Georgia. We don't know if it's going to be 1-2 or 1-3, just depending on what the rankings say tonight. But just a game that we've pretty much known was going to be there since the beginning of the season. I just don't know that we knew what it was going to look like when we got here, right? Because Georgia right now almost a touchdown favorite, 6.5-point favorites. This is the first time Alabama's been an underdog since they went to Athens back in 2015 and smacked Georgia. So it's an interesting storyline coming into this game because usually Alabama's sitting where Georgia is and Georgia's trying to knock them off. As we get ready for Saturday, what are some of the biggest things you're watching out for?
Obviously, I mean, Georgia's defense, you can say they've been tested all year because they've played, 3 or 4 top 10, top 15 teams that are now, not ranked or lower ranked. We think Kentucky or Arkansas that came in either undefeated or looking super good, and then they were just shut down by the Georgia defense. It's legit. I mean, I've seen them in person. I've seen them, on TV. They are legit, and I've said all year that if Georgia can find a way to put together a couple of touchdowns, that's game over because no team has scored more than 17 points against them. Through 12 games, they've allowed 83 total points, which is just insane when you think about it. And or even if you don't think about it, it's still insane. So I mean, that's one thing I'm looking at is how is Bryce Young, who he's definitely the leader of the team. He's probably going to win the Heisman. One of the better quarterbacks in the country. How does he, who's coming off a game where they looked really bad for 3.5 quarters against Auburn, how do they bounce back from that and try to work against one of the best defenses in recent college football? So that's one thing I'm looking at, and then also just the mental aspect. You mentioned it. Georgia hasn't beaten Alabama in the last 6 tries. Kirby Smart's 0-3 against them. This year again, you're seeing a Georgia team that's on paper way better than Alabama, but will a mental thing come in where he starts trying to outsmart Saban or trying to think too much of it? It is Alabama. It's still Alabama. They have a lower ranking now, but will that play a factor into it? Because on paper, I mean, it should be a 25 point victory for Georgia, but we obviously know it's not going to be that way. It's still Alabama, and until Georgia beats Alabama, I don't know if you can 100% say that they are the best team in the country.
McLean Baxley joining us here. McLean, finally here, man. I know it's had to be fun for you, first year following this team, and they're 12-0, best team in the country. But back in your Statesboro days down in the 912, I know you covered a lot of guys that you're seeing and following up there in Athens now. How cool is it to see the guys like Warren McClendon, Stetson Bennett, Nolan Smith stepping up for Georgia, seeing those 912 guys play crucial roles?
It's awesome. I think it just speaks to the volume that Kirby Smart had on keeping guys in state. Obviously Nolan Smith technically is IMG, but he's from Savannah, and so keeping those top talented guys from Georgia in state. I wrote about it last week how he has gotten more in-state talent than anybody else combined, pretty much. Georgia Tech isn't doing that. Obviously, State and Southern aren't doing that. So the fact that he's able to keep guys in South Georgia, North Georgia, in Metro Atlanta, Macon, keep all those guys and in Georgia playing for their state team is huge, and it is awesome to see the amount of pride they have for their state, for their high schools and their community, because they are part of it. And they grew up Georgia fans, and now they're 3 games away from giving the team their second national championship in program history. So it's pretty cool to see.
McLean Baxley, Athens Banner Herald, kind enough to take some time with us here on Second Down. McLean, we appreciate it, man. I know this week has to be crazy busy for you, covering high school playoffs, signings, all of that, and then, of course, SEC championship on top of all of that. We appreciate you taking some time, man.
Appreciate y'all. Have a good one.
Again, McLean Baxley, Athens Banner Herald. We got more to come here. I want to dive into some thoughts from the weekend. We saw a lot of different pieces of college football on display, some amazing, some not so great. I want to get y'all's opinion on them when we come back. This is Second Down on ESPN Radio. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Again, we will be at Coach's Corner this Thursday from 2 to 6 p.m., getting you ready for championship week. And I have a couple things I wanted to discuss with you guys. We obviously were speaking about the Iron Bowl a little bit. We were talking about, PJ, you have just intrinsic knowledge of the new overtime rule, maybe more so than anyone should ever know about ever.
Yeah, I've seen way too much of it.
With
Both
that,
successful and
with
unsuccessful.
that high-scoring matchup between you guys and the Illini.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody really cared about it until it was in the Iron Bowl, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, we had heard people complaining about it. Obviously, Penn State and Illinois fans were complaining about it. We've heard some fans kind of peripherally complaining about it, but when it's the game that everyone's watching and you see Alabama just having to play in a penalty shootout, I think that's when you got the attention of the entire country saying, hey, this kind of sucks. Like, this kind of isn't good. My question to you guys is this. Number one, if you like it, then you can say that you like this. What would be the perfect overtime rule in y'all's mind? Minds. You have more than one mind between you two. Yeah.
Collective mind.
Yeah.
I know people are going to hate this. I know you're going to hate this. I think you had it and you changed it. I very much liked. I think there are little things that you could change from the original college football. Well, not the original, right? But the college football overtime rules that we had a few years ago. I think there are little changes. Now, do you start at the 25? No, I think you move that back maybe a little bit. But I think so that you're not in field goal range once you start, right? You're not in scoring range once you start. I think maybe you start at the 50, maybe you start at the 40 or something like that and try and move your way up. Is that pure football at its finest? No, not necessarily. But at the same time, I think it avoids the risk of there being a 3-3 game and you go in overtime and just no one can still do anything in quarters after of more football. So I think you had it and I think you ruined it. So I'd probably move it back to about the 40 or the 50 to start things off. And from there on, you match each other's score moving forward. Both teams get a shot just like we have right now, but you aren't so restrictive with the 2-point conversions and things like that. Because what we've seen, I would agree with you to a certain extent. I think the problem with the Penn State Illinois thing is it started out, wow, this is terrible because format's terrible. And then it turned into a meme, right? Because it was a meme. Like it literally was. It was the worst display of college football I've ever seen from two football teams. So, you look at overtime 3 and 4 and people are like, man, this really kind of sucks.
Yeah.
And then you get to 6 and 7 and they're like, no, these teams are just really bad. But
I think both things can be true at the same time.
For sure. But I think for mine, you move back to the 40 or the 50. You still have to gain positive yards to get in a scoring position, but you still have the back and forth of, all right, both teams getting an opportunity, both teams not starting off at their own 20 or anything like that, have to work their way in a scoring position, have to earn their way into the end zone, and both get a shot to defend the other team in the right way.
I hate the rule that they have now. I hate the old rule. I think they should just go what the NFL does. Play an extra quarter. At the end of the day, these are teenagers, grown men. Man, play an extra quarter and see who can score first. And in the game at that. You could kick a field goal. They kick a field goal. You go into another overtime. Just play an extra quarter. Duke it out. If it ends in a tie, at this point, it ends in a tie. You wasn't worthy enough to score anyway in overtime. But
I'm gonna take it one step further than that. This might make some people mad. I don't think there's anything wrong with a regular season tie. I think too often we force these narratives where it's Alabama and Auburn played a 60-minute football game, and after 60 minutes, they were even. But because Alabama can run a 2-point conversion play better than Auburn can, which is literally 0.001% of the game of football.
It's like doing onside kicks, right?
Correct. It's such a minuscule aspect of the game of football because Alabama can run a 2-point conversion better. We saw 2 overtime periods where they played 25-yard line football and they were still even after that, right? They both scored a touchdown and they both kicked a field goal, right? We saw that for 2 quarters, and then just because Alabama's a little bit better at scoring 2-point conversions, they get the win and Auburn gets the loss.
Whew.
It's stupid.
It's
I
terrible.
Like,
swear
there's-
to you.
There's no other words to say. It's stupid. You played 60 minutes of the sport and they were even. What's wrong with the tie? And if you want to look at just the way it would affect the national narrative, is all of a sudden Alabama's not sitting there as 11-1. Alabama's sitting there at 10-1-1, which can change a whole lot of things when you're talking about the college football playoffs. So I don't see anything wrong with ties. Obviously, when you get to postseason and somebody has to win, then you go into overtime.
Yeah.
But just like with other sports, i.e. soccer or hockey, right? Ties are fine in the regular season. You go into extra periods when you need it, right? Think it's fine. It's just, if you're going to do overtime, I agree with Cam, don't change the sport. Like, I hate penalty kicks in soccer. I understand the intensity of them, but I think they're stupid. You take something that is an iota of what the sport is, and you decide a game that was played. And soccer, for those of you who don't know, it's you play 2 45-minute halves, and then a lot of times it actually ends up being 2 50-minute halves because you get the extra time in there. So you play 100 minutes, and then you play 2 more 15-minute, or is it 20 minute?
I think it's 15.
Yeah, 2 more
Yeah.
15-minute. Yeah, 2 more 15-minute intervals, and then if it's still nobody scored, then you go to the penalty shootouts, right?
Mhm.
So if you wanted to do the 2-point conversions after you played 15 more minutes of football, fine. But I think you change the game too much, right? I think the biggest part of football is field position. It is a sport of hostile real estate acquisition.
Yeah.
That's what football is. But when you set the ball at 25, you've completely given that up.
Right.
And so,
Just don't go backwards.
Question.
You got a field
Yeah.
goal. Yeah.
So this 2-point conversion mess, is this going to be in the playoffs?
Oh, yeah.
Like
It's
Yeah.
everywhere. Yeah.
so. Like it's not just for the regular
yeah,
season.
no,
it's
if,
for the playoffs.
if Georgia Alabama go to overtime,
I swear to
this
you, I
week,
would lose
it's
my
a
mind.
2-point
I would
conversion
lose
off.
my mind if they get to the third overtime where it's hinging on a 2-point conversion. I don't think that's fair to the players either,
Yeah.
per se. I mean, you've battled that hard to get to the third overtime where you've been balanced.
But here's my question. This is what I would ask the decision makers in college football is the goal behind the 2-point conversions is less plays, right? Is we feel like the more plays that players have to go out there and execute, the bigger chance they get hurt. Okay. If that's the case, then shouldn't you put a minimum amount of time has to run off the play clock before you're allowed to run another play?
Right.
Yeah.
Because people are changing the sport to where some teams, I mean, Georgia maybe runs 60 plays a game, right? But Tennessee's out here trying to run 100.
Exactly.
And so they're playing, and when you get down to a season, these guys are playing almost twice as many quote unquote games, if you're just talking about snaps, than Georgia is, right? So, I mean, if you're really that concerned about the sport and the players, is that what we're looking at? Is that the best way to do it?
Right.
Stupid. You've already been beating up each other for an hour. Now you're trying to conduce that.
That's
in
what they say
overtime.
is like you're exhausted, and then like injuries can go up because the players aren't able, but it's like both teams are running slower, man.
Yeah.
Like both teams got tired legs.
Yeah.
I
It's-
just
Well,
I
Can't
hate
avoid
it.
that. You
Well,
can't
that-
avoid it. It's a part of the game, man. It
Yeah.
is.
and that's what makes me even more insanely frustrated is the why, right? The reason. Why did we make this change, right? As college football, because of a couple games,
Mario tweets in and says only field goals. You just play
Yeah.
horse,
right? Why not?
like from the third row
yeah,
off the right pylon and in. But you have to call bank.
even then, like
I'd be sick.
it's still a part of the game for sure. It's a big part of the game, but I mean, how many times have we seen games come down to an extra point, and it's like you feel robbed of like, oh goodness, great. It's a part of the game for sure, but getting back
Florida
to my
would like to have a word with Alabama.
yeah, right. Getting back to the point I was about to make is just the reason we saw this change is because of a game that we see once every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
LSU,
A&M.
Texas A&M go crazy.
which was an
And when-
amazing
It
football
was an
game.
amazing game. The overtimes were insane and amazing, and I don't think anyone was sitting there saying,
This is stupid. I hate
I
this.
sat here for too long. I shouldn't have needed to sat here for too long to watch the amazing, dose of college football that I just watched. And think about the last time we saw that before then. It was Michigan and Penn State, 2013, something like that. So it's 4 or 5 years before
Yep.
that. So, I mean, it's not like this happens every year and all the time.
Imagine how amazing Auburn and Alabama would have been like if they played just not even what we talk about, just the regular overtimes that they've normally done in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I think it
Imagine
would-
that.
yeah, I
That
think
would
it
have been an
incredible.
even better game. Auburn may have won the game.
How many people
So-
in the stands do you think actually knew what was happening?
Not a lot.
I think there was a lot of confusion. There was a
The-
lot of
what-
silence because
what-
of heartbreak,
what-
and there was a lot of silence because
Mhm.
they were trying to figure out what the hell was going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't. I would say maybe 20% of the people inside Jordan Hare knew what was happening.
It makes the game so boring. I text my friend, I'm like, dude, this is not it. And he's an Alabama fan.
No,
And
but
he
just
was
like
I
just
don't
because
like
like literally Alabama won that game because they had John Mechie.
Yeah.
And like you cannot cover him in a 2-yard space.
Right.
Like that's literally why they won the football game. I think about how different it would have been if Alabama scores that touchdown with 20 seconds to go and it's just a relief. It's like, all right, we're getting out of here with a tie. We didn't lose.
Right.
or you just play a NFL overtime. And whoever scores first, if Alabama scores first on
Yeah,
their first
I
drive,
think
it's
that's probably
done.
fair.
I think that's the best
I think that's
one.
probably fair. Is like we all know what would have happened in that case is Auburn and TJ Finley were not going to do anything with the football,
Mhm.
and Alabama would have marched down the field and won that
Yeah.
football.
Especially with
There
how
you go.
he
That's fair enough, though.
how he was there at the end.
Or
I mean, he was
for the
limping
love of
all over
God,
the
you
place.
give Auburn a chance. What happens if Bryce Young gets hit, throws a pick, and it gets returned for a touchdown? Like
Yeah.
you give Auburn a chance, but nope. You got to cover John Mechie 1-on-1 from 2 yards out, or you lose.
NFL wide receiver, 1-on-1. That's
Just
it's impossible.
toasting your corner. I think it's stupid. I hate it. I hope they change it real quick. Or like I said, put it after 2 overtimes and it's not decided, call the game. I don't know. Something like that. I don't think ties are bad. I know ties are like inherently un-American.
Right. Well, I mean,
But-
not necessarily. Like you said, we've seen it. We've seen it in other sports throughout the regular season as
Yep.
well. I mean, however you want to say it, we
Bro,
play
Donovan
we
McNabb
play
did-
soccer and we play
Donovan
hockey here.
McNabb
So like,
and somebody else like did this recently where they didn't know you could tie.
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
Wait, you could tie in the NFL. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, dude.
they didn't even know after that
Yeah.
first
Freaking
overtime
Steelers and
quarter.
Lions just tied.
Come on, let's not. I spent all Thanksgiving talking about that with my
I
family.
had to bring it up today.
Let's not
It
do
makes
that.
me feel better
hold
as a
on. I
Falcons
gotta
fan.
ask
Do
this because
this.
I hold on. I got my shirt on. Let me. What
Yeah,
Yeah.
do you want? Okay, listen. Shirt says mental health. Talk about it.
we
PJ,
already talked about it too much.
Steelers got boat raced. Brent Pry, your defensive coordinator, is leaving to take.
That's okay.
to-
I expected that.
That's okay.
Well, like I've
He's
expected.
the best coach on your team.
Agreed, but yes, agreed. Wholeheartedly. We could go in depth about that, especially after that
Like,
performance
okay, wait,
last
let me
week.
ask you this. Let me ask you this.
But
What would you have been happier about? What the current situation is, or if James Franklin had left and Brent Pry was now the head coach at Penn State?
I'd be happier about that. I'd want him as my head coach, yeah.
Hmm.
And it's all about being in the not being a CEO and being in tune with what to do during games.
I
I
think
think-
he's gonna be awesome at Virginia Tech. I think he is
I
like
think
a
it's going to be
perfect
incredible.
fit.
Yeah, I think you look at the past 8 years. What has been the starling part of this team every single year? It's been the defense.
Yeah,
And the one time you have the offense to be able to compete, you're in the Rose Bowl and you're what was that? The field winning the Fiesta Bowl. So I mean, yeah, no, it's I expected it to happen sooner. I expected this to happen a year or two ago.
yeah.
So the fact that we've had him for as long as we have, I'm thankful for.
And
it.
I think it's
But
like I've seen a lot of people tweeting about this. I know we gotta go to break. I've seen a lot of people
Yeah.
tweeting about this, saying like, "Oh man, Penn State's only 26 in total defense. Look at where they are in defense, like average yards given up per play,
Mhm.
and they're top 10. They're tied with Texas A&M for yards given up per play. It's just the offense at Penn State is so ungodly bad that the defense just stays on the field.
what's amazing is like it's not even that bad. It's just situational football. Like,
No,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
bad, dude.
okay,
It's bad. It's like mid 2000s LSU offense bad. We're
Yeah,
like, yeah, we
that's
know
pretty
you got
bad.
we know you got some NFL wide receivers, and we know
That's
that
pretty
you have
bad.
some offensive linemen that are pretty good, and you probably have a good couple running back recruits, but the quarterback position is so bad that everything else falls apart. And the
It's-
play
it's
calling,
inconsistent. Yeah, the
the
play,
play
call-
calling is so simple and not in a good way. Just
Yeah.
predictable, I guess, is a better way
Yeah.
to say it. Is it's just so predictable that it's almost unwatchable.
right? Predictable until I don't know.
Yeah, until they do something that you're like, I couldn't even comprehend that. If you told me the worst thing to think of, I couldn't think of
I
doing
don't
that.
know.
Only worst play calling this year has been Virginia when they did a throwback pass to an offensive lineman against Virginia Tech on third down in a crucial situation.
especially in the Illinois game. But I think situationally, again, and this goes back to that the head coach and the offensive coordinator. I mean, situationally, again, you look at 2 drives in the beginning where you throw the football against the worst pass defense in the nation,
Yep.
and it was incredible. And then what do you do in the second half? You throw 10 passes
Well, listen,
and score
you got 10 more
no
years.
points,
You got 10
you
more
know?
years of
So,
James Franklin to figure it out.
situational.
If he finishes out the end of his contract, I'll be 40 is all you need to know. We got to take a quick break. We'll come back with more right here on Second Down. I don't Second down on ESPN Radio, presented to you by the Uniform Source. Again, as a reminder, we will be at Coach's Corner coming up this Thursday from 2 to 6 p.m. to get you ready for championship weekend. Come hang out with myself and the guys from 3 and Out as we'll be broadcasting live from Coaches. Big show coming up today. Speaking of 3 and Out, they'll catch up with Tate Casey, two-time national champion with the Florida Gators. Also catch up with DJ Shockley. He knows a little thing or two about throwing touchdowns in the SEC championship. So we'll catch up with Shock coming up in the 4 o'clock hour. Also Scott Carter from FloridaGators.com gonna swing by. So much to dive into on 3 and Out. But guys, again, is it hyperbole to say that this is going to be or has already been, and it's not even the offseason yet, but the biggest offseason or the biggest season of change in the history of college football?
Yes. Players and coaches. I do
That's
believe that.
huge. Everything, even playoff restructuring, possibly. We'll see. But I mean, yeah, it's huge, enormous. I mean, the amount of change we could see is ridiculous.
I'm trying to think. And obviously, there's like people can do the stuff where it's like, well, I mean, I think the biggest offseason ever, probably the offseason they formed college football. Like you can do
all right.
in modern college football, the biggest offseason, biggest season of change I've ever seen. I think like the number 2 would easily be this past summer.
Yeah.
Right. With the NIL stuff, with the
Mhm.
transfer portal, with the free transfer and all that. I think like it really this past summer, but I think this is going to, just because of the news and now that we're seeing this really take shape,
Yeah.
maybe it's the chicken and the egg thing where it's
Right.
one birthed the other, so the one that birthed it is the bigger deal. But I just think the calamity and the fact that you have schools that are hiring coaches like this right now, and it's like second tier news just based on some of this other stuff, is unbelievable. So obviously we're gonna have plenty to talk about the rest of the week. We'll dive into the SEC championship some more coming up tomorrow.